Hi, this is Daniel with TrustGraph, and here I'm going to show you how to launch TrustGraph using files that you've downloaded through the config UI or you've downloaded directly from the GitHub repo. The first thing we need to do is specify our CLI version. I already have it installed, but I'm going to show you anyway. So we're going to do right now 0.15.2. So we're going to do a pip install TrustGraph CLI 0.15.2. And when we do that, you can see I've already done that. We should have two packages, not just one. We should have TrustGraph base and TrustGraph CLI. It's good to check to make sure they're the right versions. Now, I'm already in the directory where I've downloaded a configuration from the config UI. So if I see what I have, these are the three things you're going to see in that directory. We have a docker-compose.yaml file, and then we have the directories for Grafana and Prometheus. You won't need to do anything in those directories. If we open that YAML file, we can see all the configurations I chose. For instance, I chose to use Google AI Studio, Gemini 1.5 Flash, max output tokens of 8,000, temperature of 0.3. We keep going up, we'll see the prompts that I selected. I didn't actually make any alterations with that one, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. This allows you to see all the different containers and all the different components of TrustGraph if you open the configuration YAML file. And of course, you can go into text editor and edit this manually yourself, and we're going to see that a little bit when I go into the other files. So we also see that I chose Cassandra. I chose a token chunker as opposed to a recursive, and these are the parameters I chose. You can also see that all the resource settings are in here as well, which, as I pointed out sometimes, especially in the Discord, depending on your machine, sometimes you may need to tweak these, especially if you use Podman. Podman, sometimes these resource parameters need a little bit of tweaking. Because this is the only file in the directory and the Docker engine is already running, I can just do docker compose up and -d. And I've already downloaded all the container images. If you have not, if this is your first time, it can be a little bit of a slow process to download all those from the Docker Hub. That's just a product of downloaded images from the Docker Hub, unfortunately. So let's check to make sure we have all containers are running. We do. We don't see any that are exiting. So there is, actually, we should talk about that. 1 second. The init pulsar, that container should exit. Its only job is to actually set a lot of the parameters for pulsar, and then it should exit. So anytime you check for all containers, you should see this one. However, it should be the only container that is exited like that. If you see a container that's in a bit of a exiting and restart loop, that could be a really good indication of something that's wrong. Doesn't have enough memory, doesn't have enough CPU. It's typically memory. So, and the way that we check to make sure that all the services are up and running is using this command through the CLI, and we can see all the services are up and running, which means TrustGraph is totally ready to start ingesting documents. Now, we're going to shut it down. And I always recommend we want to add that -v flag. We want to make sure all the volumes are removed. And let's just check once everything gets shut down. We're going to check that everything is removed. So let's make sure there are no containers. And let's make sure there are no volumes. They're not. So that looks good. So now let's switch directories to where I downloaded all the files directly from the GitHub repo. And I need to go up one, and now we can do that. So this is where I downloaded directly from the GitHub repo. So I would have gone to 0.15.2 and just downloaded that zip file. And when I unzipped it, it's going to look like this. So we see three directories now. Because I'm going to use Docker, let's dive into the Docker Compose directory. And now you see a lot of YAML files. So is with the config UI, you're choosing one of these, and it's going to build a customized one for you. Each one of these YAML files is for this particular deployment configuration. So if you choose Google AI Studio Cassandra, you're going to get Cassandra with the text completion and text completion RAG using Google AI Studio. If we open one of these, so I'm going to use Google AI Studio again, even though it's a lot to type, it's going to look a little bit different because this is the default one. So you can see the default parameters are using a different amount of output tokens, a different temperature. Um, let's see, where is it? Different chunking parameters. So the way at this point, if you wanted to change any of this, you would actually come in with a text editor and manually edit all these values, which is both extremely powerful and extremely easy to make a really small mistake. It's very frustrating to miss a space, miss a dash, forget a quotation mark, and you launch TrustGraph and something's not working, and it's all just because of a slight syntactical error somewhere in these YAML files. The YAML file for the Docker Compose versions are not too bad. The Kubernetes configuration files, as you can imagine, are significantly more complex, much easier to make mistakes in, which is again why we have the configuration UI. So in this case, because we don't have one file, we have to specify which file we want to launch. So we're going to do Docker Compose again, but we have to specify the file. So we're going to do -f tg, we're going to do Google AI Studio, and we're going to choose Cassandra, which is our default graph store. Up -d. I've already pulled all those images, so that's why it starts so quickly. Again, we're going to check. We see lots of containers. We don't see anything in an exit loop, but just to be sure, the only container that's exited is a init pulsar, which is exactly what it should do. And let's check the state of everything else. Embeddings is often the last service to totally come up, either that or store triples, something associated with the graph store. So this is not uncommon for this one to be the one that we're waiting on. Typically, if if you're waiting more than about a minute and a half, that's a good sign that something is wrong. If you're waiting more than 2 minutes, something is definitely wrong. It's typically in that 60 to 70 seconds rate. So at this point, everything is up and running. We can start ingesting documents. But just to be sure, we're going to shut everything down. Again, because we've specified the file, we have to, once again, we just can't do down dash V. We have to actually specify the file. I know it's a lot to type. And that's how we launch TrustGraph with either files downloaded through the config UI or files downloaded directly from the GitHub repo releases.